This story is titled, Hidden in My Parked Car, I Watched My Unfaithful Wife Slip into the hotel with her lover, then swiftly dialed his wife. Come quickly, they're trying to hide their affair at the hotel. Hey Reddit, I never thought I'd be sitting in my car on a bright Tuesday morning, watching my wife walk into a clinic with another man. My name is Adam, and at 31 years old, I thought I had everything figured out. I have a successful career as a software architect at a major tech company in Boston, and until today, I believed I had a happy marriage with Claire, my wife of 10 years. From the outside, our life looked picture perfect, but appearances can be devastatingly deceptive. As I sat in my black Audi, my knuckles turned white from gripping the steering wheel too hard. I had parked strategically where I wouldn't be noticed, giving me a clear view of the parking lot across the street. The moment I saw Claire emerge from her car, laughing and looking carefree, something inside me cracked. She was holding hands with Eric, a colleague from her office. The sight of her looking so happy, happier than she'd been with me in months, felt like a physical blow to my chest. I watched as they walked together, her arm wrapped around his like they were some perfect couple. She looked so comfortable with him, so natural, as if she didn't have a husband waiting at home. A husband who adored her. A husband who had built his entire life around her. The casual intimacy between them made my stomach turn, but what happened next destroyed me completely. They walked into a building together, and when I managed to focus through my shock, I realized it was a women's health center. The sign above the entrance might as well have been a neon accusation. In that moment, all my suspicions exploded into terrible certainty. They weren't just having an affair, they were here to get an abortion. The thought made my stomach churn violently, and for a moment I could barely breathe as rage replaced my initial disbelief. Despite the hurricane of emotions threatening to overwhelm me, I didn't storm out of the car. I didn't scream. I didn't even cry. Instead, I remained perfectly calm, recognizing there was power in calmness, a lethal kind of power that I desperately needed right now. With steady hands that betrayed none of the turmoil inside me, I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I never thought I'd use. I had found it during my late-night investigations when I first suspected something was wrong in my marriage. A woman answered after 3 rings. Hello? Her voice was cautious, uncertain. Diana, this is Adam, I said, keeping my voice steady but low. I had to maintain my composure if I was going to get through this. Your husband and my wife are at the Women's Health Center right now. Each word felt like acid in my mouth, burning and corrosive. They're getting an abortion to cover up their little affair. I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles going white once again. If you hurry, you can catch them red-handed. There was silence on the other end for a moment. Then I heard her sharp intake of breath. Are you serious? She asked, her voice trembling with shock. Dead serious, I replied, my voice cold as ice. I'm sitting in the parking lot watching them right now. Diana hung up without another word. The weight of what I had just done didn't hit me immediately. Instead, I felt a dark satisfaction creeping in. This was just the beginning. The storm I was about to unleash would consume them both. I remained in my car, watching the clinic's door like a hawk. The minutes ticked by slowly, each second feeling like an eternity as I waited for what would happen next. Then I saw her. Diana arrived in her red Mercedes, slamming her car door so hard the sound echoed across the parking lot. She marched toward the building with purpose, her fury visible even from where I sat. I couldn't help but feel a grim sense of camaraderie with this woman I'd never properly met before. She was on my side now, whether she realized it or not. Just as Diana approached the clinic, the door opened. Claire stepped out with Eric right behind her. I had only met Eric once at a company party last summer. Back then, he had seemed harmless, even charming in a forgettable sort of way. Now he was nothing but a snake in the grass, a man who had slithered into my marriage and poisoned everything I held dear. Diana's voice cut through the morning air, sharp as a blade. Eric! She screamed, her rage unmistakable. I watched as Eric froze in place, all color draining from his face as he recognized his wife's voice. Claire's eyes went wide with panic, and she instantly let go of his arm, as if that single gesture could somehow make everything disappear, erase the reality of what they'd been doing. Now was the time to make my presence known. I stepped out of my car, the door shutting behind me with a definitive click. Claire's head snapped in my direction, and the look on her face was priceless. A perfect mixture of shock, guilt, and pure panic. Adam, she started, her voice already breaking, ready to spin whatever lie she'd prepared. I held up my hand to silence her. Save it, I said coldly. my voice betraying none of the emotional hurricane raging inside me. Unlike me, Diana wasn't trying to maintain her composure. She marched straight up to Eric and slapped him across the face so hard the sound echoed through the parking lot. "You disgusting pig!" she yelled, her voice shaking with rage. "You've been cheating on me with her?" She pointed an accusatory finger at Claire, who seemed to physically shrink back from the confrontation, looking every bit the coward she was. Eric started stammering, trying desperately to come up with an excuse, some magical explanation that would make this all disappear. But Diana cut him off mercilessly. "Don't even try," she spat. "I'm done with you!" I turned to face Claire, who was staring at me with tears welling up in her eyes. Tears that were meant to manipulate me, to make me feel sorry for her. They had no effect. "Adam, I can explain," she said, her voice breaking for maximum emotional impact. "Explain!" I echoed, letting the venom drip from every word. "What exactly do you plan to explain, Claire? The affair, or the fact that you were willing to kill the evidence?" She flinched as if I'd physically struck her, but I didn't feel an ounce of sympathy. For the first time in years, I saw her for what she truly was. A liar, a betrayer, a stranger wearing my wife's face. Eric tried to step between us, attempting to play peacemaker, or perhaps hoping to minimize the damage to his own life. I shot him a look that made him freeze in his tracks. "Don't even think about it," I warned, my voice low and dangerous. By now, the clinic staff had started peeking through the windows, obviously wondering about the commotion unfolding in their parking lot. I didn't care anymore. Let them see. Let the whole world see what kind of people Claire and Eric really were. Claire stood frozen, her tear-filled eyes darting between me and Eric, as if trying to calculate which one of us offered the better chance of escape from this situation. The parking lot felt like a stage, and we were the main actors in some tragic play that none of us had signed up for. Except I wasn't the one who wrote this script. They were the authors of this disaster. Claire clutched her designer purse like it was a lifeline, her knuckles turning white from the pressure. Eric shifted nervously under Diana's unrelenting glare, unable to meet her eyes. Diana, her face twisted in fury, grabbed Eric's collar, yanking him closer. "How dare you drag me into this public humiliation?" she hissed, her voice trembling with rage, each word precise and cutting. Eric stumbled backward as soon as she released him, raising his hands defensively, as if worried she might strike him again. "Diana, please," he begged, trying to sound calm, but failing miserably. "Not here. Let's talk about this privately." His voice aimed for reasonable, but his darting eyes betrayed his panic. Diana wasn't backing down, though, and neither was I. I took a step closer to Claire, unable to mask the disgust in my voice. "What were you going to do, huh? Walk out of here and come home to me like nothing happened? Cook dinner? Smile and ask me about my day? All while carrying this on your conscience?" My voice cracked on the last word, and I hated myself for letting her see how much she'd broken me. Claire flinched at my words, her lips parting like she wanted to say something meaningful, but nothing came out. The silence between us felt heavier than anything she could have said. Eric, still playing the coward, tried to intervene. "Adam, listen, man." I turned to him, my voice sharp enough to cut through steel. "Shut up. You don't get to speak to me. You don't get to justify this." Our confrontation had drawn attention by now. A security guard emerged from the clinic, a stocky guy with a walkie-talkie clipped to his belt. He looked more annoyed than concerned about the scene unfolding in the parking lot. "Folks, I'm going to need you all to calm down," he announced with practiced authority, "or I'll have to ask you to leave." I ignored him completely, my focus locked on Claire. Finally, she spoke, her voice trembling with what sounded like practiced regret. "Adam, I didn't mean for it to go this far." I laughed bitterly, shaking my head in disbelief. "Didn't mean for it to go this far?" I repeated her words, my voice rising with each syllable. "You don't just accidentally end up in a clinic with your lover, Claire. You don't just accidentally destroy our marriage." Her face changed then, and I watched as guilt gave way to something uglier, pure defiance. "You weren't there, Adam," she snapped, her voice rising for the first time. "You don't know what it's been like being married to you. Always working, always distracted. I was lonely." There it was, the classic excuse, the shifting of blame. I felt the dagger twist deeper into my chest as she tried to make this somehow my fault. "Lonely?" My voice had dropped to barely above a whisper, trembling with rage. "Is that your justification for this? Is that what makes it okay?" Before Claire could answer, Diana stepped in, her voice sharp and cutting through Claire's self-pity. Oh, please, Claire, spare us the pity party. You're not lonely, you're just selfish. Claire's mouth snapped shut, her gaze flicking between me and Diana like a trapped animal looking for escape. The security guard took another step closer, his tone more commanding now. All right, that's enough, he said firmly. You've made your scene. Take it elsewhere. Eric seized his chance, grabbing Claire's arm and trying to pull her toward his car. Let's go, Claire, come on, he urged, his voice low and hurried, desperate to escape the situation he'd helped create. But Claire yanked her arm away from him, spinning back toward me. Adam, please, she begged, tears now streaming down her face. Can we just talk alone? Oh, now you want to talk? I responded, my voice low but trembling with suppressed rage. All those years of love, trust, and devotion were crumbling around me, leaving nothing but anger and betrayal in their place. Before I could continue tearing into Claire, Diana did something unexpected. She reached into her leather bag and pulled out her phone with a purposeful movement. She hit the record button and held it up, aiming the camera directly at Claire's pale, tear-streaked face. Say it, Claire, Diana said coldly, her voice like ice. Say it on camera. Tell your husband why you were here today. She held her phone steady, capturing every flicker of emotion on Claire's face as the color drained from her cheeks. Claire froze, her eyes widening with panic. Diana, stop! This isn't— Oh, it is, Diana interrupted, refusing to back down. You owe him that much. You owe me that much. You don't get to walk away from this without facing the consequences. Claire looked at me then, desperation written all over her face. Adam, please, she pleaded. Don't let her do this. This isn't who we are. This isn't us. I laughed bitterly at that, a hollow sound devoid of any humor. Who we are. Claire, you did this. You and Eric, you made this mess. Now you have to own it. The security guard stepped closer again, his voice firm and professional as he tried to defuse the situation. All right, folks, that's enough. If you don't leave now, I'm calling the police. Eric seized the opportunity, grabbing Claire's arm again, this time with more force. Let's go, Claire, he said, through gritted teeth, clearly eager to escape before things escalated further. But Claire wrenched free from his grip again, turning back to me one last time. Adam, I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice breaking. I didn't mean for it to happen like this. I stared at her, the woman I had loved more than anything in the world, and felt nothing but a hollow emptiness inside. You didn't mean for it to happen like this? I repeated her words, my voice devoid of all emotion. Well, it did. And now, we have to live with it. Diana lowered her phone, a mixture of satisfaction and disgust playing across her features. Come on, Adam, she said, placing a hand briefly on my arm. Let's leave them to their pathetic excuses. I turned to walk away, hearing Claire sobbing behind me. Her cries echoed in the cold morning air, but I didn't look back. I couldn't look back. This wasn't the ending I had wanted for us, but it was the one they had written. Now, all that was left was figuring out how to pick up the pieces of the life they had shattered. The drive home felt like a blur. My knuckles were white against the steering wheel, and my mind kept replaying every word, every glance, every sickening detail of what had just happened. Claire, Eric, the clinic, the abortion. Everything spun in my head like a nauseating carousel. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. It was Diana. I let it ring, unable to talk to her now. Not yet. Not when everything was still so raw. When I pulled into our driveway, I noticed Claire's car was already there. Of course, she had beaten me home. Cowards always run ahead, always try to control the damage. I took a deep breath, steadying myself before stepping inside the house we had once called our home. There she was, standing in our kitchen, clutching a mug of chamomile tea like it was some kind of lifeline. Her eyes were puffy and red. She'd clearly been crying. But I felt nothing. No sympathy, no sadness, just hollow, ice-cold anger that burned through my veins. Adam, she started, her voice cracking with emotion. I held up my hand to stop her. Don't, just don't. But she didn't listen, of course. Please, let me explain. It wasn't supposed to. Wasn't supposed to what? I snapped, throwing my keys on the counter with enough force to make her flinch. Happen? Be found out? You planned an abortion with him, Claire. That's not a mistake. That's not a slip-up. That's a goddamn decision. She flinched again, her lip trembling as she struggled to maintain her composure. It wasn't like that. You don't understand. Oh, I understand perfectly, I said coldly, crossing my arms over my chest. You got caught, and now you're trying to salvage whatever you can. For a moment, there was silence between us. Just the kitchen clock ticking methodically and the faint hum of our refrigerator. Background noises of a life that was falling apart at the seams. Then I noticed something change in Claire's demeanor. The tears suddenly stopped flowing, her shoulders straightened, and her lips curled slightly upward. It was as if she was done playing the victim. A new mask was settling into place. I watched as Claire's whole demeanor transformed before my eyes. "You know what, Adam?" "Fine," she said, her voice hardening. "Yes, I was with Eric, and yes, we were at the clinic. But do you really think you're some innocent angel in all of this?" My eyes narrowed dangerously. "Don't you dare turn this around on me! You've been emotionally absent for years," she said sharply, her voice rising with each accusatory word. "You buried yourself in your work. You stopped noticing me. You stopped caring. Eric, he saw me. He made me feel wanted again." Her words were meant to cut deep, but they didn't pierce me anymore. I was beyond feeling hurt by her manipulations. I just stared at her with pure disgust as she tried to justify her betrayal. "Wanted?" I repeated, my voice dripping with disdain. "You wanted to feel wanted? So you threw away 10 years of marriage for that?" She smirked then, a cruel expression crossing her face that I never would have believed my Claire was capable of. "You think you're some perfect husband, Adam? Please. You were halfway out of this marriage long before Eric ever showed up." The laugh that escaped me was bitter and hollow. "Wow. You know, I almost expected some guilt, some remorse, but you're just rotten inside, aren't you?" Her face twitched at that, but she didn't respond. The sharp chime of our doorbell cut through the tension, making us both freeze in place. I glanced at Claire. Her face had gone pale. "Expecting someone?" I asked, my voice cold. She shook her head, her lips parting slightly in confusion. I walked to the door, my body tense, and peered through the peephole to find Diana standing there. Her makeup was smeared, her eyes were bloodshot, but there was something resolute about her stance. She was holding an envelope, gripping it so tightly her knuckles had turned white. "Adam," she said firmly when I opened the door, "you need to see this." Claire appeared behind me, her voice trembling. "Diana, what are you doing here?" Diana's glare could have set the house on fire. "Don't speak to me, Claire," she snapped, before turning back to me and handing over the envelope. Her hand was shaking as she did so. "I found this hidden in Eric's study. Thought you'd want to know." I pulled out the papers and started scanning through them, my vision blurring as I realized what I was holding. Hotel receipts, text message screenshots, photos of Claire and Eric together in places I recognized from business trips I thought she'd taken alone. And then the final blow, a pregnancy test stick tucked into the envelope, with Claire's name scribbled on a sticky note attached to it. "Positive," it said. My chest tightened painfully, and my hand started to shake. I turned to Claire, my voice barely above a whisper. "So it wasn't just an affair. It wasn't just some fling. You were pregnant with his child." Claire's face crumbled, her mask slipping. "Adam, please!" Diana crossed her arms, her voice sharp as a blade. "Don't even try, Claire! You've lied enough for one lifetime!" The world felt like it was caving in around me. My ears were ringing, and my stomach was churning violently. Claire stepped closer, trying to reach out to me, her eyes pleading. "It didn't mean anything, Adam. I swear. I was scared. I didn't know what to do." I stepped back, away from her touch. "No, don't touch me. Don't ever touch me again." Diana turned to leave, but not before locking eyes with me, her gaze intense and meaningful. "Whatever you decide to do next, Adam, make sure it's something they'll never forget." And with that, she was gone, leaving behind a silence that suffocated the room. Claire sank to her knees in the doorway, sobbing into her hands, but I couldn't look at her anymore. I turned and walked upstairs, shutting our bedroom door behind me. Whatever came next, it wouldn't be forgiveness. I stood in our bedroom, staring at the neatly made bed, the same bed where Claire and I had shared 1,000 intimate moments. Whispers of love, shared dreams, tangled sheets. Now it all felt tainted, poisoned by her betrayal. I could still hear Claire sobbing softly downstairs, but the sound felt distant, as if it were coming from another world entirely. My mind was racing, flipping through fragments of our life together, desperately trying to pinpoint the exact moment where everything had gone wrong. The notification sound from my phone snapped me out of my trance. It was Diana. "You deserve better. If you need anything, call me." I tossed the phone onto the bed with a sigh. Diana had her own mess to clean up, and I had mine. I opened the closet and grabbed my duffel bag, starting to throw clothes in haphazardly. I needed space. I needed air. I needed to be anywhere but here, surrounded by reminders of the life I thought we'd built together. As I zipped up the bag, something caught my eye. A small shoebox tucked behind Claire's row of expensive heels. Curiosity got the better of me. I pulled it out, sat on the edge of the bed, and opened it with trembling hands. Inside were letters, handwritten letters. The first one began. Claire, I can't wait until we're finally free from all this. I'm tired of sneaking around. You and me, we deserve better. Love, Eric. My hands started shaking uncontrollably as I flipped through them. There were dozens of letters, all variations of the same theme. Plans, fantasies, promises of a life together after she left me. But at the bottom of the box, there was a folder labeled Plan B. When I opened it, my blood ran cold. Legal documents, divorce plans, asset splits. My name was on every page. There was even a draft of a separation letter written in Claire's handwriting. I had been seconds away from losing everything. My head spun as I slammed the folder shut, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. Claire wasn't just cheating on me. She was preparing to leave me. Not just leave me, but gut me financially and emotionally in the process. The rage that coursed through me was electric, making my vision blur as I marched downstairs, duffel bag in one hand and the shoebox in the other. Claire was sitting on the couch, her knees pulled up to her chest, face streaked with mascara and tears. She looked up when she saw me, and her expression twisted into fear as soon as she noticed the shoebox. Adam, she stammered, where did you find that? I slammed the box onto the coffee table hard enough to make her jump. This, I said, my voice dangerously low. This was behind your heels, Claire. Along with our future, apparently. Her eyes widened, and she lunged for the box, but I snatched it away before she could reach it. No, you don't get to hide this now. You were planning to leave me, weren't you? And not just leave me. Bleed me dry. She started crying again, her voice becoming shrill and desperate. It wasn't like that. Eric convinced me. He said we could have a better life together. That what? I snapped, cutting her off. That you'd scam me out of everything I've worked for? That you'd destroy me in every possible way before skipping off into the sunset with him? She fell silent, her head dropping into her hands again. I paced the living room, clutching the folder so tightly it crumpled in my grip. You know, Claire, I said, my voice breaking slightly despite my efforts to remain cold. I would have fought for us. If you had come clean, if you had been honest, I might have been able to forgive you. But this isn't just infidelity. This is war. Adam, she whispered, her voice small and pathetic. I shook my head violently. No, don't you dare! Don't get to cry now! Don't get to play the victim when you were holding the knife the whole time! Her eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of something. Regret, maybe. But it was gone just as quickly, replaced by a steely defiance that chilled me to the bone. Fine, she said quietly, wiping her tears away with the back of her hand. You want the truth, Adam? Yes, I was going to leave you. Yes, I wanted more. And Eric, he promised me more. He promised me freedom. Freedom from this boring, predictable life. My jaw clenched so tight I thought my teeth might crack. Predictable, I spat. You mean stable? You mean loyal? You mean the life we built together? She stood up, her voice rising to match mine. But I wasn't happy. You think being stable pays for emotional neglect? For feeling invisible? Eric made me feel alive, Adam. I let out a bitter laugh. Alive? You felt alive sneaking around behind my back? Planning my financial execution while smiling at me over dinner? She froze, and for a moment neither of us spoke. The tension between us was thick enough to cut with a knife. Then a knock came at the door, making us both turn toward it. Claire's face paled visibly. Who is that? She asked, her voice suddenly small again. I walked towards the door cautiously, peering through the peephole. To my surprise, it was Eric. His face was bruised, his shirt stained with sweat, and what looked like blood. He appeared disheveled, a far cry from the confident man who had been with my wife at the clinic earlier that day. I opened the door halfway, positioning myself in the gap to block his entry. You've got 5 seconds to turn around and disappear before I do something we'll both regret, I growled, barely containing my fury. But Eric's voice trembled as he spoke, his eyes wide and desperate. Adam, she's lying to you. Before I could respond, Claire bolted from the living room, her voice rising to a shriek. Don't listen to him, Adam! He's crazy! Eric shoved a crumpled envelope into my hand, his fingers shaking. Look at this, please, he pleaded. Before you do anything, just look at this. The envelope felt heavy in my hand. weighed down by whatever secrets it contained. Claire screamed from behind me, her voice frantic. "Eric, stop!" I stepped back into the house, slowly opening the envelope while keeping my eyes on both of them. Inside was a sonogram, and on the corner, in Claire's handwriting, a name was carefully written. Baby Adam. My head snapped up, everything around me spinning. Eric's voice seemed to come from far away. "It wasn't mine, Adam," he said softly. "The baby, it was yours." Claire collapsed to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. The world went silent as the weight of those words settled in my chest like a stone. This wasn't just betrayal anymore. This was something far, far worse. The sonogram felt heavy in my trembling hands, the black and white image staring back at me like a ghost from a life I didn't even know I'd lost. Baby Adam, my child, my child. My head was spinning violently as I looked from the sonogram to Eric, then back to Claire, who remained collapsed on the floor, her mascara-streaked face buried in her hands. The full horror of what had happened was slowly dawning on me. "Explain," I said, my voice low, barely above a growl. Claire's head shot up, her eyes wild and desperate. "Adam, please! Explain!" I roared, the sound bouncing off the walls and cutting through the suffocating silence of the room. She flinched as if I'd struck her, opening her mouth to speak. But Eric stepped forward, his voice shaky, yet there was something raw and honest about it that made me listen. "She lied to me too, Adam," he said. "She told me the baby was mine. She told me she knew it was mine. But when I found this in her purse, I realized she had been playing both of us." Claire shrieked, leaping to her feet with unexpected energy. "Eric, shut up! You don't know what you're talking about!" But Eric wasn't done. His eyes locked onto mine, earnest and pained. "She was using us both. You for your stability and your money. Me for whatever twisted fantasy she had about escaping her life." I couldn't breathe. The room felt too small, the walls closing in around me. I turned to Claire, holding up the sonogram that showed the child I never knew about. "Was it mine?" I asked softly, the words barely making it past the lump in my throat. Her lip trembled, and for a moment I thought she might tell me the truth. But instead, she crossed her arms over her chest, lifted her chin defiantly, and said, "Does it even matter now?" The air was sucked out of the room. My stomach dropped as if I'd been punched in the gut. "Does it matter?" I repeated slowly, disbelief coloring every word. "You carried my child and it doesn't matter to you?" Her face twisted into something unrecognizable, cruel, cold, alien. This wasn't the woman I had married. This was someone else entirely. "It's over, Adam," she said flatly. "The baby's gone. What difference does it make now? Are we really going to keep digging up this grave?" Eric looked like he was about to explode, his fists clenched by his sides. "You're a monster, Claire," he said, his voice shaking with anger. "An absolute monster!" She turned to him, sneering. "Oh, don't you dare get self-righteous with me, Eric. You were perfectly happy sneaking around, playing the hero when it suited you. You're just mad because your fantasy didn't pan out the way you wanted it to." I couldn't take it anymore. "Enough!" I shouted, my voice raw with emotion. "Both of you, enough!" The silence that followed was deafening. I turned to Eric, my decision made. "Get out!" He hesitated, his eyes flicking to Claire, then back to me. "Adam, if you need—" "Get out!" I bellowed, beyond caring what the neighbors might think. Without another word, Eric turned and walked out the door. I closed it behind him, then turned back to Claire. She was standing there, arms still crossed, chin lifted in defiance, as if she still thought she had some control over this situation. "Sit down," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. She hesitated for a moment, her defiance wavering slightly in the face of my controlled fury. Eventually, she dropped onto the edge of the couch, legs crossed tightly, as if trying to protect herself from whatever was coming next. I sat across from her, leaning forward with my elbows on my knees, still clutching the sonogram in one hand. The image of my unborn child, a child I never knew existed, burned into my palm like a brand. "You're going to tell me everything right now," I said, measuring each word carefully. "Every lie, every secret. I want it all out on the table. Because if you lie to me one more time, Claire, I swear to God I will make sure you regret it." For the first time since this nightmare began, I saw genuine fear flash in her eyes. She let out a shaky breath and nodded, seemingly accepting that she'd reached the end of her manipulations. "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay, I'll tell you." I braced myself, but nothing could have prepared me for what came next. It started about a year ago, she began, her voice quiet but steady. You were working late a lot. You were distant. I felt invisible. Eric was there. He was charming. He was attentive. It started with casual conversations, coffee breaks, and then it escalated. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay silent as she continued her confession. I didn't mean for it to go so far, she said, her gaze dropping to her hands. But then I missed my period. I took a test and it was positive. I panicked. I didn't know if it was yours or his. She paused, running her hands through her hair. I told Eric it was his because I thought if he believed it, he'd take responsibility, and we could start over. Her voice broke, but I felt nothing. Just a deep, hollow emptiness where my heart used to be. And the abortion? I asked coldly, the word bitter on my tongue. She hesitated, looking down at her hands twisting in her lap. Eric convinced me it was the best option. He said we couldn't build a life together with complications. Complications? I repeated, my voice dripping with venom. This was how they saw my child, as an inconvenience, a complication to be eliminated. Her shoulders sagged visibly. But when I went to the clinic that day, I couldn't do it. I couldn't go through with it. I froze in place, my breath catching in my throat. What do you mean you couldn't do it? She looked up at me, her tear-filled eyes wide. The baby was never aborted, Adam. The words hit me like a freight train, knocking the air from my lungs. What? I left the clinic before it happened, she explained, her voice shaking. I told Eric I went through with it, but I didn't. I was going to tell you. I was going to come clean. My mind was reeling, struggling to process this new information. If the baby wasn't aborted, then... Where's the baby now, Claire? She swallowed hard, her eyes darting away from mine. With my sister. I couldn't keep her here. I thought if you found out, you'd never forgive me. A whirlwind of emotions crashed over me. Rage, confusion, disbelief, and most unexpectedly, hope. I stood up so suddenly that Claire flinched. Give me your sister's address, I demanded. Now. She hesitated for half a second before scribbling it on a notepad from the coffee table. I grabbed my keys, the sonogram still clutched in my hand like a talisman. Adam, wait! Claire called as I headed for the door, but I didn't look back. Somewhere out there was my child. A baby girl who had been hidden from me, used as a pawn in a game I never agreed to play. And I was going to find her, no matter what it took. The address Claire had scribbled down felt like a lifeline, though every part of me knew this wasn't going to be simple. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly, my knuckles turned white as I sped through the darkened streets, barely registering the traffic around me. My mind raced with thoughts of a baby girl I'd never met, thoughts of Claire's twisted betrayal, and the haunting realization that I had been living in a carefully constructed lie for over a year. Every moment, every conversation, every kiss goodnight had been tainted by the secret she'd been keeping. I pulled up to a modest suburban house just outside town. The porch light was on, casting a pale yellow glow onto the cracked pavement of the walkway. I cut the engine and sat there for a moment, trying to calm the storm brewing inside me. My daughter, my child, was somewhere behind those walls. With a deep breath to steady myself, I stepped out of the car and walked up to the door. My heart pounded in my chest as I knocked twice, the sound firm and deliberate in the quiet evening air. The door creaked open, and there stood a woman I recognized as Claire's older sister Marie. She was wearing an oversized sweater with her hair pulled into a messy bun. She had the unmistakable exhaustion of someone who'd been carrying a heavy secret for too long etched across her face. Adam, she said softly, my name cracking as it left her lips. Where is she, Marie? I asked, my voice firm but not unkind. I wasn't here to cause a scene. I was here for my daughter. Marie hesitated, glancing behind her into the dimly lit hallway. You shouldn't be here, she replied. But there was uncertainty in her voice. I have every right to be here, I countered, standing my ground. That's my daughter in there, isn't it? Marie's lips trembled, and for a moment I thought she might close the door on me. But then she sighed, her shoulders dropping in resignation, and stepped aside. Come in. I walked into the small living room, immediately hit by the faint smell of baby powder and formula. The scent struck me like a physical blow, making everything suddenly real in a way it hadn't been before. And then I saw her. She was sleeping peacefully in a bassinet near the couch, her tiny chest rising and falling with each breath. A soft blanket with pink polka dots covered her small body. One tiny hand clenched into a fist beside her head. My knees almost buckled at the sight. She's mine? I whispered, my voice breaking with emotion. Marie nodded slowly. Her name is Lily. Lily, my daughter. The name echoed in my mind, immediately feeling right, feeling important. I took a step closer, afraid to wake her, afraid to disturb the fragile serenity of the moment. Why? I choked out, the question encompassing everything. Why would Claire do this? Why hide her from me? Marie crossed her arms and sighed deeply. You know my sister, Adam. She's always been impulsive, selfish. She thought she could control everything. Eric, you, even this little girl. But when she realized how deep she'd dug herself, she panicked. She asked me to take Lily for a little while, but it's been months now. I've been raising her like she's mine. Tears welled up in my eyes, and I quickly wiped them away with the back of my hand. I want to take her home, Marie, I said with quiet determination. She's my daughter. She belongs with me. Marie hesitated, studying my face. Adam, are you sure you're ready for this? You've just had your world turned upside down. A baby isn't something you can just fix everything with. I looked her dead in the eyes, my resolve unwavering. She's my child. I missed her first cry, her first smile, her first everything. I won't miss anything else. Marie nodded slowly, accepting my decision. Okay, but let me pack some of her things. As Marie disappeared into the back room, I knelt beside the bassinet and gently touched Lily's tiny hand. Her fingers twitched in her sleep, and something deep inside me cracked wide open. A rush of love and protectiveness, unlike anything I had ever experienced. I'm here now, I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. And I'm never leaving you. But the tender moment was short-lived. The front door burst open behind me, slamming against the wall with enough force to make the pictures rattle. Claire stormed into the house, her face red with anger and her eyes wild with fury. What the hell are you doing here, Adam? She screamed, loud enough to make me wince. Marie reappeared in the doorway, holding a small diaper bag, her expression hardening at the sight of her sister. Claire, stop it. You need to leave. But Claire wasn't listening. She stormed over, her finger pointed inches from my face. You think you can just waltz in here and take her? She's mine! She's not a possession, Claire! I barked back, rising to my feet to face her. She's our daughter, and you lied. You hid her from me. You don't get to play the victim here. Claire's face twisted into an ugly snarl, all pretense of remorse abandoned. You'll never understand why I did it. You think you're some kind of hero. You're not. You're a boring, predictable man who couldn't keep me happy enough, Marie shouted, stepping between us with her hands raised. Both of you stop it! There's a baby sleeping here! The room fell silent except for Lily's soft, undisturbed breaths. Claire's shoulders heaved, her breath sharp and erratic. Her eyes flicked to the bassinet, and for a moment, I thought I saw regret flash across her features. But just as quickly, her expression turned cold again, the mask firmly back in place. You'll regret this, Adam, she said, her voice low and venomous. You'll regret every second of this. She turned on her heel and stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind her hard enough to rattle the windows. Marie exhaled shakily, her hand pressed against her chest. I didn't expect her to follow you here. I bent over the bassinet and carefully, with hands that were somehow both trembling and sure, picked Lily up in my arms for the first time. She stirred slightly, her tiny face scrunching up before settling back into sleep, completely unaware of the chaos surrounding her arrival into my life. She's safe now, I said softly, holding her close to my chest, marveling at how perfectly she fit in my arms. Marie wiped a tear from her cheek. Take care of her, Adam, and take care of yourself. I nodded solemnly, holding Lily as if she were the most precious thing in the world. Because she was. As I walked out into the night with my daughter in my arms, I realized something with perfect clarity. This wasn't over. Claire wouldn't let this go easily. But one thing was certain. No matter what happened next, I would fight tooth and nail to protect Lily from the chaos her mother had created. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something that had been absent for far too long. Hope. Driving home with Lily in the back seat felt surreal. Every few seconds I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting her to vanish, as if she were just another cruel illusion conjured up by Claire. But there she was, sleeping soundly in her car seat, her tiny fists balled up under her chin, completely oblivious to the chaos that surrounded her very existence. My house felt unfamiliar when I carried her inside. The living room, which had once been a place of quiet evenings with Claire and wine glasses on the coffee table, now felt like an empty stage after the final curtain had fallen. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt right anymore. I placed Lily in the temporary crib I'd hastily set up in the guest room. She stirred slightly at the transition, but quickly settled back into sleep, her soft, rhythmic breathing filling the silence of the room. "Welcome home, sweetheart," I whispered, gently brushing a strand of wispy hair from her forehead. The gesture felt both foreign and natural at the same time, like I'd been meant to do this all along. As I stood there watching her sleep, the weight of everything came crashing down on me all at once. Claire's lies, her manipulation, her venomous words. They swirled around me like smoke, suffocating and inescapable. The life I thought I had was gone, replaced by this new reality I was still struggling to comprehend. But amidst all that wreckage, there was this child, my daughter, an innocent caught in the crossfire of adult deceit. I sank into the chair beside the crib, buried my face in my hands, and let the tears come. My body shook with silent sobs, not from weakness, but from the sheer exhaustion of carrying betrayal, anger, and grief on my shoulders for far too long. But I couldn't break now. Lily needed me to be strong, to be whole, to be the parent she deserved. The next few days passed in a blur of diaper changes, formula bottles, and sleepless nights. My once structured life had been turned upside down, replaced by the chaotic schedule of an infant. I took emergency leave from work, explaining to my boss that I had a family situation that required my immediate attention. It wasn't a lie. There were moments when I caught myself staring at Lily, overwhelmed by how something so pure could come from such a twisted mess. Her eyes, my eyes, looked up at me with complete trust, unaware of the storm that had brought her into my arms. But peace never lasts long, does it? It started with the phone calls, first from unknown numbers, then from Claire herself. I ignored them all, refusing to let her venom seep into the fragile sanctuary I was creating for Lily and myself. Then came the emails. The first one was short and cryptic. "You can't keep her from me. I'll do whatever it takes to get her back." The second, a day later, was more threatening. "You think you've won, Adam? This isn't over, not by a long shot." By the third email, Claire's mask had fully slipped, revealing the true ugliness beneath. "If you don't give me Lily back, I'll make sure you regret it. You think the courts will side with you? I'll paint you as an unstable, unfit father. I'll ruin you." I slammed the laptop shut, my pulse pounding in my ears. It wasn't enough for Claire to destroy our marriage. Now she wanted to use our daughter as a pawn in whatever twisted game she was playing. I wouldn't let that happen. I couldn't. I picked up my phone and dialed my lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Allison Chase who had handled a few of my business disputes in the past. She answered on the second ring. "Adam," she greeted, her voice sharp and professional as always. "Allison, I need your help," I said without preamble. "It's about custody, and it's about Claire." Within an hour, I was sitting in her downtown office, Lily asleep in her carrier beside me. Allison flipped through the stack of documents I'd brought. Emails, text messages, even the sonogram photo I'd clutched so tightly on the night I confronted Claire. Her expression remained impassive, but I could see the calculating look in her eyes as she assessed our position. "She's backed into a corner, Adam," Allison said, setting the papers aside with a decisive tap. "She knows she doesn't have the upper hand anymore, and that makes her dangerous. But we'll build a case. You have proof of her lies, her manipulation, the fact that she abandoned Lily for months. The courts will see through her act." "But what if they don't?" I asked, my voice cracking slightly. "What if they buy into whatever sob story she spins?" Allison leaned forward, her gaze steady and reassuring. "That's not going to happen. But you need to prepare yourself, Adam. Custody battles are ugly and Claire will play dirty. Are you ready for that?" I looked down at Lily, her peaceful face as she slept in the carrier, her tiny hand still clutching my finger even in sleep. The answer came without hesitation. "I'll do whatever it takes." Allison nodded, satisfied with my resolve. "Good. Then let's get to work." That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house, every distant car passing by the window felt like a threat. Claire's words echoed in my mind. "I'll make sure you regret it." The threat hung in the air like a storm cloud, dark and ominous. Around 2 a.m., as I paced the hallway between my bedroom and Lily's room, a loud bang echoed from the front door. My heart stopped mid-beat. I froze, listening intently, unsure if I had imagined the sound. I rushed to Lily's room first, making sure she was still asleep and undisturbed before grabbing the baseball bat I kept in the hall closet. My fingers tightened around the smooth wood as I approached the front door, adrenaline coursing through my veins. "Who's there?" I shouted, holding the bat at the ready. No response came, just a heavy silence that seemed to fill the entire house. I peered through the peephole but saw no one. Cautiously, I cracked the door open just enough to look out, ready to slam it shut at the first sign of danger. There was no one there, but an envelope had been taped to the door, my name scrawled across the front in Claire's unmistakable handwriting. With trembling hands, I ripped it open, unfolding the letter inside. The words seemed to leap off the page, each one dripping with malice. You can lock your doors and hide behind your lawyers, Adam, but I'm always one step ahead. Enjoy your time with Lily while you can. It won't last. Attached to the letter was a photo, a picture of my house, taken from across the street at night. Someone had been watching us. Claire's message was clear. She could get to us anytime she wanted. I stumbled back into the house, clutching the envelope like it was a ticking bomb. My breaths came fast and shallow as I scanned the street through the window. The shadows seemed darker, the silence more menacing. Claire wasn't bluffing. She was escalating. I rushed back to Lily's room, checking the locks on every window and pulling the curtains tightly shut. Then I sat beside her crib, the baseball bat resting against my knee, and waited for morning, determined to keep her safe. If Claire wanted a war, she'd get one. But she had made one critical mistake. She had underestimated just how far I was willing to go to protect my daughter. There was nothing I wouldn't do to keep Lily safe, no line I wouldn't cross. The following days passed in a haze of paranoia and exhaustion. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow outside the window felt like Claire's presence lurking and waiting to strike. I installed a security system, added deadbolts to the doors, and even put shatter-resistant film on the windows. I barely slept. The baseball bat never far from my side. But in those sleepless hours, as Lily cooed softly in her crib or nestled against my chest, I found strength I didn't know I had. Her innocence, her complete dependence on me, fueled my determination to create a safe, loving environment for her, no matter what obstacles Claire might throw in our path. Allison worked tirelessly on the custody case, gathering mountains of evidence. Claire's abandonment, her threatening emails, her increasingly unstable behavior. On paper, our case looked strong. But deep down, I knew this wouldn't be decided in a courtroom. Claire wasn't playing by the rules anymore, if she ever had. I was proven right 2 nights later. It was past midnight, and I had just checked on Lily for the 3rd time since putting her down. I was walking back to my bedroom when I heard the faint click of the backyard gate. I froze mid-step in the hallway, every nerve in my body lighting up like a live wire. Lily was asleep in her crib, blissfully unaware of the danger approaching our home. I moved swiftly, grabbing the bat and crouching low near the kitchen window. Peeking out into the yard, I saw her, Claire. She was dressed in all black, her blonde hair pulled into a messy ponytail. She had a set of keys in her hand and was approaching the back door with determined steps. Keys I thought she had returned months ago when she had claimed to be on a girls' trip that I now knew had been spent with Eric. My stomach turned to stone. I could have called the police. I could have let the professionals handle it. But something snapped in me. This woman, this venomous, manipulative stranger who had once been my wife, was not going to take my daughter. I flung the door open just as Claire was about to insert the key. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I roared, making her jump back in surprise. Claire's eyes widened, but it wasn't fear I saw in them. It was pure, unfiltered hatred. "She's mine, Adam!" she screamed, pointing a trembling finger at me. "You think you can just take her away from me? You're a pathetic excuse for a man, and you're going to lose!" "She's not a trophy, Claire," I said, struggling to keep my voice level. "She's a child you abandoned, a child you lied about." Claire lunged toward me, her hands clawing at my chest like a wild animal. I caught her wrists and held her back, but she writhed and thrashed, trying to break free of my grip. "Get out of here, Claire," I barked, shoving her backward with enough force to make her stumble. "You're done. You're not stepping foot in this house again." She caught herself, her face twisted into an ugly mask of rage that bore no resemblance to the woman I had once loved. "You think this is over?" she hissed. "You think you've won? You're nothing, Adam. Nothing without me." And with that, she turned and stormed out of the yard, disappearing into the night like a vengeful spirit. I slammed the door shut and locked it, my heart racing like a drum in my chest. My hands trembled as I pressed my forehead against the cool wood, trying to process what had just happened. This wasn't just about custody anymore. This wasn't about lawyers or courtrooms or legal agreements. Claire had gone completely unhinged. And now she was a threat, not just to me, but to Lily as well. The next morning, I called Allison the moment her office opened, my voice tight with urgency as I recounted Claire's midnight visit. "We need to file for a restraining order immediately," Allison said, her normally composed voice edged with concern. "What she did last night was breaking and entering, Adam. This is serious. She had keys, I pointed out, glancing nervously at Lily as she played in her bouncer, blissfully unaware of the danger surrounding her. It doesn't matter, Allison insisted. You've made it clear she's not welcome, and she attempted to enter your home in the middle of the night. The courts will see this for what it is, a threat. By that afternoon, the restraining order was in place. Claire couldn't come within 500 feet of me, Lily, or our home. It was a piece of paper, a legal formality that might not stop her, but it was something. It was protection under the law. For a few days, everything was quiet. No emails, no phone calls, no ominous envelopes taped to my door. I started to breathe a little easier, to sleep a little deeper. Lily settled into a routine, and I found myself settling with her, learning her cues, her cries, her smiles. In those moments, I could almost forget the chaos that had brought her into my life. But the calm was shattered one evening as I was giving Lily her bath. My phone rang, an unknown number flashing on the screen. I almost didn't answer it, but something told me I should. Hello? I said cautiously. Adam? It was Diana, Eric's wife. Her voice was tense, urgent. I need to talk to you. It's about Claire. My grip tightened on the phone. What about her? She's been meeting with Eric? Diana said, her words tumbling out in a rush. I think they're planning something. I overheard them talking yesterday. She mentioned Lily, and I'm worried, Adam. I don't trust either of them. My blood ran cold. What exactly did you hear? Not enough details, Diana admitted, but Eric was telling her to be patient and that the papers would be ready soon. They saw me before I could hear more. Thank you for telling me, I said, my mind already racing through worst-case scenarios. If you hear anything else, I'll call you immediately, she promised. Just be careful, Adam. Keep Lily close. I thanked her and hung up, my heart pounding in my chest. I scooped Lily out of the bath, wrapping her in a towel and holding her close as water soaked through my shirt. I didn't care. I just needed to feel her safe in my arms. The next day, I left work early, unable to focus on anything but getting home to Lily. The babysitter, a retired nurse named Margaret who lived down the street, greeted me with a smile when I walked in. She's been an angel today, Margaret reported, gathering her things. Just went down for her afternoon nap about 20 minutes ago. I thanked her and walked her to the door, watching until she was safely in her car before locking up. Then I went to check on Lily. She was sleeping peacefully in her crib, one tiny hand resting beside her face, her chest rising and falling with each breath. I stood there watching her, overwhelmed by the fierce love I felt for this little person who had only been in my life for a short time, but had completely claimed my heart. The sound of the mail slot clicking open broke my reverie. I closed Lily's door quietly and went to see what had been delivered. Among the usual bills and advertisements was a thick envelope with no return address. My name was printed on a label, not handwritten. With a growing sense of dread, I opened it. Inside was a stack of legal documents and a note written in Claire's flowing script. Did you really think a restraining order would stop me? See you in court, Adam. I'm going to take her and there's nothing you can do about it. I flipped through the papers, my heart sinking further with each page. Claire had filed for emergency custody of Lily, claiming I had taken her against Claire's will, that I was mentally unstable, that I posed a danger to our daughter. The allegations were outrageous, bold-faced lies, but they were there in black and white, official and threatening. The hearing was set for the following week. My hands shook as I dialed Allison's number. They're trying to blindside us, Allison said after I explained the situation. But they won't succeed. We have documentation of everything. Claire's abandonment, her threatening behavior, the fact that she left Lily with her sister for months. Don't worry, Adam. The judge will see through this. But what if they don't? I asked, voicing my deepest fear. What if they give her custody, even temporarily? Allison's voice softened slightly. We won't let that happen. Trust me, Adam. We're going to fight this with everything we've got. I hung up, somewhat reassured but still on edge. The legal system was supposed to protect the innocent, to ensure justice was served. But I had seen enough in my life to know that wasn't always the case. Sometimes, the person who lied the most convincingly won. And Claire had always been an excellent liar. That night, after Lily was asleep, I sat at my computer, staring at the blinking cursor in the search bar. What I was considering felt extreme, desperate. But then, I thought of Claire's face that night in the backyard, the hatred in her eyes, her promise that I would regret taking Lily. And I started typing. International custody laws, passports for infants, countries with no extradition. The searches made me feel sick, but I couldn't stop. I needed to know my options, needed to be prepared for the worst. Because if the court somehow sided with Claire, if they were going to hand my daughter over to a woman who had abandoned her, who had lied about her very existence, who had shown nothing but instability and malice, well, I wasn't going to let that happen, no matter what it took. I was so engrossed in my research that I almost missed the sound. A soft scraping noise coming from the back of the house. My head snapped up, ears straining in the silence that followed. It could have been nothing. A branch against the window, the house settling. But my instincts were screaming that something was wrong. I closed my laptop and moved silently through the house, grabbing the baseball bat from beside the couch. The security system was armed. I checked it every night, but I wasn't taking any chances. Not when Lily's safety was at stake. I crept toward the back of the house, keeping close to the wall. The scraping sound came again, this time accompanied by what sounded like hushed voices. My grip tightened on the bat as I approached the kitchen window that overlooked the backyard. Carefully, I peered through a gap in the curtains. 2 figures stood by the back gate, their faces obscured by the darkness. One was clearly Claire. I'd recognize her silhouette anywhere. The other was taller, broader. Eric, most likely. They were arguing in hushed tones, Claire gesturing wildly toward the house. I reached for my phone, ready to call the police, when Claire's voice suddenly rose loud enough for me to hear. "I'm not waiting any longer," she hissed. "The hearing is just a formality. My lawyer says with these accusations, the judge will have to grant me temporary custody. But I'm not taking any chances. What if he runs with her?" "Keep your voice down," Eric urged, gripping her arm. "This is a bad idea, Claire. Breaking a restraining order is serious. You could end up losing custody permanently." "I don't care," she shot back, wrenching her arm free. "She's mine, and I'm taking her tonight." That was all I needed to hear. I dialed 911, keeping my voice low as I reported a restraining order violation in progress, potentially escalating to attempted kidnapping. The dispatcher assured me officers were on their way. I moved to Lily's room, positioning myself between her crib and the door. If Claire somehow got inside, she'd have to go through me to get to my daughter. Minutes ticked by like hours as I waited, bat in hand, ears straining for any sound of forced entry. The flash of police lights through the curtains came as a relief. I heard startled exclamations from the backyard, followed by the authoritative voices of officers identifying themselves. I stayed put, unwilling to leave Lily alone even for a moment. My phone buzzed with a text from the security company. Police had requested access to the property, and they wanted my confirmation. I gave it, then heard heavy footsteps on the back porch, followed by a firm knock at the door. "Mr. Miller, Boston PD." I went to the door, baseball bat still in hand, and checked through the peephole before opening it. 2 officers stood on my porch, and in the yard beyond them, I could see Claire being handcuffed, her face contorted with rage. Eric was already in the back of a patrol car. "We caught them attempting to access your property," one officer explained. "Given the restraining order and what we overheard about their intentions, we're taking them both in for questioning. Would you be willing to come down to the station tomorrow to give a statement?" "Yes, of course," I agreed, my heart still racing. "Thank you for responding so quickly." "No problem. We'll have a car drive by periodically through the night, just to be safe." The officer handed me his card. "Call if you need anything." I thanked them again and closed the door, watching through the window as they led Claire to a separate patrol car. She looked up at the house, her eyes finding mine through the window. There was no remorse there, no recognition of the woman she had once been. Just cold, calculated hatred. As the police cars pulled away, I returned to Lily's room. She was still sleeping peacefully, undisturbed by the commotion outside. I sank into the chair beside her crib, the baseball bat sliding to the floor as the adrenaline drained from my body, leaving me exhausted. I must have dozed off because the next thing I knew, sunlight was streaming through the curtains, and Lily was babbling happily in her crib. I blinked, disoriented for a moment before the events of the previous night came rushing back. My phone showed 3 missed calls from Allison. I called her back immediately while preparing Lily's morning bottle. "I just heard what happened," she said without preamble. "Claire's been charged with violating the restraining order, and they're holding her for attempted breaking and entering." "What about the custody hearing?" I asked, cradling the phone between my ear and shoulder as I tested the formula temperature on my wrist. "That's actually why I called," Allison replied, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "The judge has reviewed our documentation and Claire's recent actions. Given the circumstances, particularly her arrest last night, he's postponed the hearing and instead issued a temporary order granting you full custody with no visitation rights for Claire pending a full investigation. I nearly dropped the bottle. Seriously? Seriously. Claire's lawyer tried to argue that she was just a concerned mother trying to check on her child, but the officer's testimony about what they overheard blew that defense out of the water. Adam, this is a huge win for us. Relief washed over me, so powerful I had to sit down. Thank you, Allison, for everything. Don't thank me yet, she cautioned. We still have the full hearing to get through, and Claire won't give up easily. But this is a very good sign. The court is seeing her for who she really is. After hanging up, I picked up Lily and held her close, breathing in her sweet baby scent. For the first time since discovering Claire's betrayal, I felt like we might actually be okay. The road ahead would be difficult. Explaining to Lily about her mother someday, navigating life as a single father, healing from the wounds Claire had inflicted. But at that moment, with my daughter safe in my arms, I knew we could handle whatever came next. The sound of the doorbell interrupted my thoughts. Cautiously, I approached the front door, checking the security camera feed on my phone before opening it. Marie stood on the porch, looking anxious. I heard what happened, she said as I invited her in. Claire called me from jail this morning, demanding I bail her out. Are you going to? I asked, bouncing Lily gently as she started to fuss. Marie shook her head, reaching out to stroke Lily's cheek. No. I'm done enabling her, Adam. I've been doing it our whole lives, making excuses for her behavior, cleaning up her messes. But seeing how she's acted these past few months, especially toward her own daughter, she sighed heavily. I can't do it anymore. She needs to face the consequences of her actions. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it. Despite everything, Claire was still Marie's sister. This must be hard for you. It is, she admitted. But not as hard as watching her destroy herself and everyone around her. You and Lily deserve better. She hesitated, then added, I was hoping I could still be part of Lily's life. I know I'm Claire's sister, but I love that little girl and… Of course you can, I interrupted. You kept her safe when Claire abandoned her. You're her aunt. You'll always be welcome here. Marie's eyes filled with tears. Thank you, Adam. That means more than you know. As Marie cradled Lily, making her giggle with silly faces, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. Life hadn't turned out how I'd planned. Far from it. The woman I had loved for a decade had betrayed me in the most profound way possible. But that betrayal had also brought me Lily, and for her, I'd endure it all again in a heartbeat. The future was uncertain. Claire would likely continue fighting. The custody battle would drag on, and someday, I'd have to explain to Lily why her mother wasn't in her life. But I wasn't facing it alone anymore. I had Allison fighting for us legally, Marie providing a connection to family, and most importantly, I had Lily, the unexpected gift who had given me a reason to rebuild when my world had shattered. We would be okay. More than okay. We would thrive. And someday, when Lily was old enough to understand, I would tell her our story. Not a tale of betrayal and heartbreak, but one of resilience and unconditional love. 6 months passed with a surprising swiftness. Winter gave way to spring, and spring blossomed into early summer. Lily was growing so fast it sometimes took my breath away. She had started crawling, was babbling constantly, and had 2 tiny teeth that made her smile even more heartbreakingly adorable. Every day brought new discoveries, new milestones that I diligently recorded in the baby journal Marie had given me. The legal battle with Claire had dragged on, just as Allison predicted. Claire had been released on bail after 3 days in jail, her charges reduced after her lawyer argued that she was suffering from postpartum depression and wasn't thinking clearly. It was another lie to add to the growing list, but one that gained her some sympathy with the court. The custody hearing had been rescheduled, postponed, and rescheduled again as Claire's legal team filed motion after motion. Each delay was both a relief and a torment. More time with Lily without interference, but also more time living under the shadow of uncertainty. Through it all, I focused on creating a stable home for Lily. I returned to work part-time, finding a balance that allowed me to be present for her while maintaining the career I'd worked so hard to build. I hired a nanny, a kind, grandmotherly woman named Eleanor who adored Lily and came with impeccable references. Diana had become an unexpected ally, regularly checking in and even testifying about what she had witnessed between Claire and Eric. Her own divorce from Eric was proceeding, and she seemed lighter each time I saw her, as if shedding a toxic relationship had allowed her to rediscover herself. Marie visited every weekend, bringing toys and clothes for Lily and stories from her childhood that someday I'd share with my daughter. She never mentioned Claire directly, but I could see the sadness in her eyes sometimes, the mourning for the sister she had known before all of this. I had just put Lily down for her afternoon nap when my phone rang. It was Allison. "The judge has made his decision," she said without preamble, her voice carefully neutral. "He's reviewed all the evidence, the psychological evaluations, character testimonies, everything." My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat. "And you've been granted sole legal and physical custody, Adam," Allison said, her professional tone finally breaking into genuine warmth. "Claire has been denied visitation rights until she completes extensive therapy and parenting classes, at which point she can petition for supervised visitation, but not for at least a year." I sank into the nearest chair, legs suddenly unable to support me. "It's over? We won?" "We won," Allison confirmed. The judge was particularly influenced by the testimony from Marie and the documentation showing Claire had effectively abandoned Lily for the first 3 months of her life. The restraining order violation didn't help her case either. Relief flooded through me so powerfully that for a moment I couldn't speak. When I found my voice again, it was thick with emotion. "Thank you, Allison, for everything." "You're welcome," she replied softly. "You're a good father, Adam. Lily is lucky to have you." After hanging up, I went to Lily's room and stood by her crib, watching her sleep. She looked so peaceful, so perfect, her tiny chest rising and falling with each breath. "It's just you and me now, sweetheart," I whispered. For real this time. The next few days passed in a blur of congratulatory calls and visits. Marie brought champagne, Diana brought flowers, and my parents, who had been kept in the loop throughout the ordeal, booked flights to come meet their granddaughter at last. I was so caught up in the relief and celebration that I almost missed the email. It came late one evening, after Lily was asleep, from an address I didn't recognize. "Adam, by now you've heard the court's decision. I'm sure you're feeling very pleased with yourself. You've won. Congratulations. I could tell you I'll fight this, that I'll appeal, that I'll never stop trying to get my daughter back. But the truth is, I'm tired. Tired of fighting, tired of the person I've become, tired of this endless cycle of anger and resentment. I'm leaving Boston. By the time you read this, I'll be gone. I've accepted a job offer overseas. A fresh start, away from all the reminders of how spectacularly I've ruined my life. I don't expect you to understand why I did what I did. I barely understand it myself. But I want you to know that despite everything, I do love Lily. Maybe not in the way a mother should, but in the only way I know how. That's why I'm stepping away. She deserves better than what I can give her right now. Tell her about me someday if you want. Or don't. That's your choice now. But if you do, please don't make me a villain in her story. We're all more complicated than that. I'm sorry, Adam. Not just for the affair, or the lies, or the custody battle. I'm sorry for all of it. For not being the person you thought I was. For not being the person I thought I was. Take care of our daughter, Claire. I read the email 3 times. My emotions a confusing tangle I couldn't untangle. There was relief that she was leaving. That Lily would be spared the confusion of a mother who drifted in and out of her life based on court-mandated schedules. There was lingering anger at everything Claire had put us through. But there was also an unexpected pang of something like grief. Not for the relationship we'd lost, but for the person Claire might have been if her demons hadn't consumed her. I didn't reply to the email. There was nothing left to say. Instead, I archived it, tucking it away in a digital folder where someday, if Lily asked about her mother, I'd have something to show her that wasn't colored by bitterness or revenge. That night, as I was getting ready for bed, I caught a glimpse of myself in the bathroom mirror. I looked different somehow. Older, perhaps, with new lines around my eyes that hadn't been there a year ago. But there was something else too. A steadiness. A quiet strength that hadn't been there before. I thought about the man I had been when this all started, sitting in my car watching my wife walk into that clinic with another man. How destroyed I had felt. How utterly betrayed. I had thought then that my life was ending, that I would never recover from what Claire had done to me. I couldn't have imagined then the journey that lay ahead, the painful revelations, the custody battle, the sleepless nights. But I also couldn't have imagined the fierce joy of holding my daughter for the first time, or the peace that came with creating a safe, loving home for her. Claire's betrayal had shattered the life I thought I was going to have. But from those broken pieces, I had built something new, something stronger, something real. It wasn't perfect. Raising a child alone would never be easy, but it was ours. Mine and Lily's. As I turned out the lights and checked the security system one last time, a habit I doubted I'd ever break, I felt something settle inside me. The anger that had been my constant companion for so long was still there, but it had changed, softened into something that didn't burn quite so hot. Time would tell whether Claire would keep her promise to stay away, whether she would reappear in our lives months or years down the road. But for now, Lily was safe. For now, we could begin to heal. For now, that was enough. 2 years later, "Daddy, up!" Lily's small hands reached for me as I walked through the front door, her face lighting up with the unrestrained joy that only toddlers seem capable of. I dropped my laptop bag and scooped her into my arms, twirling her around as she giggled uncontrollably. "How's my favorite girl?" I asked, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Good! We made cookies!" she announced proudly, pointing toward the kitchen where Eleanor was wiping flour from the countertops. "Is that so?" I raised my eyebrows in exaggerated surprise. "And did you save any for me?" Lily nodded solemnly. 2 cookies for Daddy." I counted. "She's quite the little baker," Eleanor said with a smile, hanging her apron on the hook by the refrigerator. "And she's getting very good with her numbers." I thanked Eleanor as she gathered her things to leave, Lily chattering away in my arms about the importance of sprinkles on cookies. At 3 years old, my daughter was a bundle of energy and opinions, with a vocabulary that seemed to expand daily and a curiosity that both exhausted and delighted me. After Eleanor left, Lily and I settled into our evening routine. Dinner at the kitchen table with Lily recounting her day in animated detail, bath time with enough splashing to soak half the bathroom, and then story time with her favorite books. As I tucked her into bed, she looked up at me with those solemn eyes that sometimes seemed far too wise for her years. "Daddy, Ellie at daycare has a mommy and a daddy. Why don't I have a mommy?" The question didn't catch me entirely off guard. I'd been expecting it eventually, but it still made my heart ache. I'd prepared for this, rehearsed what I'd say when the time came, but the reality of looking into my daughter's innocent face and explaining Claire's absence was harder than I'd imagined. "You do have a mommy," I said gently, sitting on the edge of her bed. "She lives far away." "Why doesn't she live with us?" Lily asked, her brow furrowing in the way it did when she was trying to understand something complicated. I chose my words carefully. "Sometimes grown-ups make choices about where they need to be. Your mommy decided she needed to be somewhere else, but that doesn't mean she doesn't love you." It was as close to the truth as I could get without burdening a 3-year-old with the complexities of adult betrayal and abandonment. Claire had kept her word. She hadn't returned to Boston or tried to contact us. According to Marie, she was living in London now, working for an international consulting firm. She sent birthday and Christmas cards for Lily, which I kept in a box, unsure when or if I would share them with my daughter. "Does she look like me?" Lily asked, her eyelids growing heavy despite her interest in the conversation. I smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "She does. You have her smile and her nose. But you have my eyes." Lily seemed to consider this information, then nodded as if it made perfect sense. "Maybe she'll visit someday?" "Maybe," I said, not wanting to make promises I couldn't keep. "But you know what? You have lots of people who love you very much. You have me and Aunt Marie and Grandma and Grandpa and Eleanor." "And Diana," Lily added sleepily. "Yes, and Diana," I agreed, thinking of how Diana had become a fixture in our lives. First as a friend who understood the unique pain of Claire and Eric's betrayal, and gradually as something more. Diana had been the one to encourage me to start dating again, almost 18 months after Claire left. She'd set me up with her colleague from the advertising agency where she worked, a kind-hearted woman named Jennifer who made me laugh for the first time in what felt like years. Jennifer and I had dated for several months, but ultimately realized we were better as friends. She still came to Lily's birthday parties and occasionally joined us for movie nights. It was Diana herself who had surprised me, showing up one day with takeout after Lily had been sick with an ear infection, and I was running on fumes. We'd stayed up talking long after Lily had finally fallen asleep, and something had shifted between us, a recognition of deeper feelings that had been developing beneath the surface of our friendship. We'd been dating for 6 months now, taking things slowly, both of us wary after our respective betrayals. Diana was wonderful with Lily, patient and loving without trying to replace her absent mother. And with me, she was honest and direct, qualities I'd come to value above almost everything else. Lily's eyes had closed, her breathing growing deep and even. I leaned down to kiss her cheek, then quietly left the room, leaving the door cracked just the way she liked it. In the living room, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on the couch, my thoughts still lingering on the conversation with Lily. It wouldn't be the last time we talked about Claire. As Lily grew older, her questions would become more complex, more difficult to answer. But I'd made a promise to myself when I won custody that I wouldn't demonize Claire to our daughter. Despite everything she'd done, she was still Lily's mother, still half of where my amazing little girl had come from. Someday, when Lily was old enough, I would tell her the whole story and let her form her own opinions. Until then, I would protect her not just from Claire's instability, but from the burden of adult resentments. My phone buzzed with a text from Diana. "Still on for dinner tomorrow? I made reservations at that Italian place you like." I smiled as I typed back, "Absolutely." "Eleanor already confirmed she can stay late with Lily," Diana replied with a heart emoji, making me chuckle. She insisted emoji were beneath her dignity, yet increasingly found ways to incorporate them into our conversations. As I put my phone down, my gaze fell on the framed photo on the coffee table. Lily on her second birthday, her face covered in cake frosting, beaming at the camera with pure, unfiltered joy. Next to it was a newer photo of the three of us, me, Lily, and Diana, at the aquarium. Lily's eyes wide with wonder at the jellyfish behind us. I picked up the photo, tracing the edge of the frame. If someone had told me on that awful day, sitting in my car watching Claire and Eric walk into that clinic, that in less than 3 years I would be a single father with full custody of a daughter I didn't know existed, building a new relationship with a woman who had been through a similar betrayal, I would have thought they were insane. The path that had brought me here was not one I would have chosen. It was paved with pain and betrayal, with midnight confrontations and courtroom battles, with tears and rage and moments of absolute despair. But it had also led me to Lily, to a kind of love I hadn't known was possible before holding my daughter in my arms for the first time. If I could go back to that day, would I change anything? Would I drive away without confronting Claire? Spare myself the anguish of discovering her betrayal? The question was impossible to answer. Changing any part of that day might mean a world without Lily in it, and that was a world I couldn't bear to imagine. The truth was, Claire's betrayal had broken me open, had stripped away the comfortable illusions I'd built my life around. But in doing so, it had created space for something real to grow, something messy and imperfect and infinitely precious. I set the photo back on the table and picked up my wine glass, raising it in a silent toast. Not to the past. That was done, and dwelling on it served no purpose. Not to Claire, wherever she was tonight, but to Lily, sleeping peacefully down the hall. To Diana, who had shown me that trust was still possible after betrayal. To the family we were building day by day, choice by choice. And to myself, the man I had become through fire and grief, stronger than I'd thought possible, more vulnerable than I'd ever allowed myself to be. The father my daughter deserved. The person I was still becoming, still learning to be. The road ahead would have its challenges. Raising Lily, navigating my relationship with Diana, dealing with whatever the future might hold regarding Claire. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of what tomorrow might bring. Whatever came next, we would face it together. And that was enough. More than enough, it was everything.